Good Moed, everyone, and a good night of Yom Tiv. Now, also, as usual, we can make the psicha, the opening with a bracha, and especially that it's a mitzvah from the Torah every day on Chol HaMoed and every day on Yom Tiv to have a revius of wine. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam b'rei pri hagafen l'chaim l'chaim. The truth is, we're heading now not for the psicha. The psicha was the first days of Yom Tiv, when we started off with the reliving the Yetzias Mitzrayim, the first Gula, and even with Yetzias Mitzrayim, it was only the psicha when we left on the first days of Pesach. The ultimate time when we're free completely from Mitzrayim was by Kriyas Yamsov. Until then, there was still the fear of Emas Mitzrayim Aleim. There was still the fear of Mitzrayim. And similarly, in our spiritual Gula, in the beginning of Pesach, we began to leave. We began to go out. We began to go away from the confines of the Yetzer Hara. But it's only in the end of Pesach, Shvi Shel Pesach, when we go through the Yamsov, that we actually completely get rid of the Yetzer Hara. We're actually no longer afraid of the Yetzer Hara whatsoever, and no longer afraid whatsoever of what the world will say, of what anyone around us will say, because we're completely free, and we know that there's Einoid Milvad, only the Eibishter. And in truth, as far as Geulas go, the beginning of Pesach was the beginning of all redemptions. It was the redemption of Mitzrayim, the first Geula. And it's only when we get to Achrin Shel Pesach that we complete that Geula, and we complete the purpose of the Geula with the final Geula, the coming of Mashiach. On Achrin Shel Pesach, we celebrate the coming of Mashiach. Celebrating the coming of Mashiach means not only celebrating something that happened in the past, but celebrating something which is a reality in our lives, the culmination and the purpose of Gula. And on Achrin Shel Pesach itself, we celebrate this in the morning when we read the Haftarah with a bracha before and after. The Haftarah that speaks about the coming of Mashiach. But more than that, we celebrate it in the end of Achrin Shel Pesach. As everyone knows that the Baal Shem Tov would wash 3 times on Achrin Shel Pesach, and the third time he called it the Suda of Mashiach. When it's not only talking about Mashiach as we do in the Haftarah, even if it's with a bracha, but it's even more than that. It's actually living it, eating the matzah and drinking the wine, internalizing and celebrating the truth and the reality of the coming of Mashiach. There's a story they tell about Rabbi Yoel Khan. He was going to Williamsburg to give he was coming back from Williamsburg from giving a Chassidus shir, and he was waiting for the bus, and he sees one of the Chassidim of Williamsburg is sitting near him, and the bus isn't coming. He says, der bus it kimin, the Mashiach it kimin. He says, the bus is going to come maybe when Mashiach comes. So he says, maybe not so much. The fact that the bus will come is not something which is so certain. The fact that Mashiach will come, that's something which is certain to us. On Achrin Shel Pesach, it's not only that we have a certainty that Mashiach is going to come, but we actually are living with that Mashiach in a reality that we're celebrating it already now. There is a story that the Alter Rebbe was asked, when is Mashiach coming? And the Alter Rebbe said, what should I say? The Mashiach that everyone's waiting for will never come. And the Mashiach that's coming, nobody is waiting for. The simple meaning is that the Mashiach that everyone's waiting for is a material Mashiach, a Mashiach of the money growing on trees, etc. The Mashiach that's coming is Gili Elokos, that godliness will be revealed in the entire world. And the Alter Rebbe said that nobody's waiting for. But perhaps when someone realizes what the real Mashiach is, the real Mashiach is something that Mashiach that everyone is waiting for, a Mashiach that one has to wait for, is never going to come. The real Mashiach, nobody is waiting for. There's no need to wait for it. The real Mashiach is something that's here in the world, and it only has to be revealed fully and completely, because it's the reality in what our lives is all about. And that's the idea, and that's the concept of what we talk about when we speak about Sudas Mashiach. It's not only that Mashiach is a certainty in our lives, but it's more than that. It's that Mashiach is something which is real in our very lives right now. That Mashiach is the reason that the Rabbeim said that on Shvi Shel Pesach, on Achron Shel Pesach, we don't say Shechiyanu. There's the famous story that the Rebbe Rashab, the Frierdiker Rebbe, told this story. The Rebbe told this story on various occasions. The Rebbe Rashab told the Frierdiker Rebbe, he said, this morning I heard your daughters, the two daughters of the Frierdiker Rebbe, two older daughters, were arguing. One was the oldest daughter, Chana, and there was the Rebbetzin Chaim Moshka, and the two of them were young girls, and they were arguing, why is Achron Shel Pesach different than every other Yom Tov or not? And the one said, which was the older one, Chana, she said that it's the same Yom Tov, it's a Yom Tov like any other Yom Tov. And Rebbetzin Chaim Moshka, as a young girl, she said no. Achron Shel Pesach is different than every Yom Tov, and the proof is by the fact that we don't say Shechiyanu. At that time, the Rebbe Rashab said that reminded me of a story that happened with me when I was a young boy. And when my father, the Rebbe Marash, took us to the Tzemach Tzedek, and the Tzemach Tzedek asked, why is it that we celebrate Achron Shel Pesach? And the Rebbe Rashab at that time was a very young boy, and his older sister, Chaim Moshka, his older sister, Dvera Leah, she said, the reason why we celebrate Achron Shel Pesach is because for 7 days we managed to stay away from Chametz. So the 8th day we make into a Yom Tov. And the Tzemach Tzedek said, Dvera Leah at a good cup. Dvera Leah has a good head. And it's a very good intellectual reason, the reason that she's saying. But the reason that I was told by my grandfather, the Alter Rebbe, is that the first days of Pesach is the Yom Tov of Moshe Rabbeinu, and the last day of Pesach is the Yom Tov of Mashiach. And that's the celebration of Achron Shel Pesach, it's the Yom Tov of Mashiach. The Rebbe explains the connection between the two things. Is that because it's the Yom Tov of Mashiach, that's why we don't say Shechiyanu. We don't say Shechiyanu because you can only say Shechiyanu about something that you can actually see. Mashiach, when we're celebrating Mashiach, we can't even say Shechiyanu because we don't yet see it. And yet we celebrate it with physical matzah and wine, like the Rebbe says that we can point with our fingers to the matzah and the wine. Because for a Jew, we have the power to celebrate, and that's why this Yom Tov is different than any other Yom Tov. Every other Yom Tov we're celebrating something that already happened. This Yom Tov we're celebrating and actually being able to eat matzah and drink wine for the celebration of the coming of Mashiach, which we haven't yet seen, and yet we're celebrating it in a way of reality, in a way of truth. Because for us, for Jews, the idea of Mashiach is not only something that will happen in the future, Shechiyanu we can't yet make, because we don't yet see it, but yet we could already celebrate, and we can already thank Hashem for the coming of Mashiach. And so now, as we approach Achron Shel Pesach, just like the first days of Pesach, is a time that brings into our lives the Yetzias Mitzrayim, a time that brings for the entire year. We don't say Chasal Siddur Pesach because it continues in the whole year, the celebration of the first Geula. In the same way now, as we approach Achron Shel Pesach, we're bringing into our lives, we're bringing into the reality of our lives, the final Geula, the Geula with the coming of Mashiach. We're making it into the reality of our lives. And so together with the fact that we're thanking the Eibishter, and just in the same way that we thank the Eibishter for the miracles that He's doing for us, just like it was by Yamim Mahem Bizman Hazeh, together with that we're thanking the Eibishter with a complete joy and a complete simcha, a simcha that we can feel and that permeates and that takes us through for the whole year for the coming of Moshiach. And that the Eibishter should help, that before we even reach Achrin Shel Pesach, Shvi Shel Pesach, and Achrin Shel Pesach, we should already be together with Mashiach, and by the Sudas Mashiach, we should be together with Mashiach. There's a very interesting story. There was a person who wrote to the Rebbe, and he needed a bracha for his child who was very sick, and he asked the Rebbe for a bracha, and he came then to the Rebbe. It was Yom Tov of Pesach, or maybe it was Yom Tov of Sukkot. At the end of Yom Tov, the Rebbe makes always a fabrengen for a Keishel Bracha, where the Rebbe washes, and everyone, the Rebbe announces or says to announce a few times, everyone should wash and say L'chaim. And so this Jew, he didn't want to wash. It was maybe it was Sukkot, and it was the last day of Sukkot was Erev Shabbos. And in those days, the Rebbe used to do Peres Mapo Mekadesh, but he didn't want to wash because the question, halacha, if you can wash or not at this time. And so he didn't wash. And it was already after Shkir. The Rebbe said to him, say L'chaim. He couldn't say L'chaim, he didn't wash. And later the Rebbe told him, it's a pity, I wanted you to say L'chaim. When all the Rebbeim, the Baal Shem Tov, and the Magid, and the Alter Rebbe, and the Mittler Rebbe, and Samach Tzedek, Rebbe Marash, Rebbe Rashab, the Frierdiker Rebbe, they're all here. And you could have said L'chaim. Imagine what kind of bracha you could have brought. Now imagine when we're eating the Sudas Mashiach, and we know that at the time that we're eating Sudas Mashiach, all the Rebbeim are here, and most importantly, as the Rebbe said that when we dance at the end of the Sudas Mashiach, one is supposed to dance, and this dance is called a Mashiach Tencel. And the Rebbe says there's two ways of explaining the Mashiach Tencel. One is that it's the dance that brings Mashiach, and the other is that it's the dance that we dance with Mashiach. And the Rebbe said the more Gishmaka way, the better and the more exciting way to say it, and therefore that's the way we'll choose, is that we're dancing with Mashiach. When we know that by Sudas Mashiach we're actually there with the Rebbe and we're dancing with Mashiach, and therefore it's a time when we bring all the brachas into our lives. Most importantly, that by the time we come to Shvi Shel Pesach, and how much more so by the time we come to Achrin Shel Pesach, and by the time we say the Haftarah of Achrin Shel Pesach, and definitely by the time we eat Mashiach Suda, we're actually going to be eating it together with Melech and Mashiach, who will take us out of Galus, and we'll all be in Yerushalayim Ir HaKodesh, by the rebuilt Beis HaMikdash HaShlishi, where together we'll fabreng with the Rebbe, and the Rebbe will be with us together by the Mashiach Suda, where we'll be able to say HaShecheyanu, a true and full Shecheyanu, for the coming of this Galus of Mashiach. L'chaim, L'chaim, that we should see it with our eyes. L'chaim, that the Eibusher should give every single one all the brachas, b'teva nira v'nigla, the open and revealed good, and most importantly, we should have the most important bracha, this Galus of Melech HaMashiach, immediately now. L'chaim, and a good Yom Tov L'chaim.